Well, welcome to the show. We have Mr. Jim Trotter himself, none other than the former Pro Football Writers Association president, and he's been a national football expert for such a long time, and he's been one of my mentors and people I love to follow. Welcome to the show, Jim. How you doing?
Kyle, I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, Jim, one of the major reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is to talk about the NFL's incentivizing minority hires at this time. And I know on yesterday you did a posting on Twitter talking about how Coach Locke and his association has, applauded the efforts of the NFL, but saying there's much more to be done. What's your opinion? What more can be done to be able to help the executives and the owners of NFL teams to kind of look at the coaching ranks and be able to give more opportunities to minorities?
Yeah, first off, let me say this. I think it speaks to us being in a bad state where you have to incentivize the hiring of diverse people. To me, that's sad. That's a shame. Mm-hmm. And yet the NFL office feels that basically it has no choice at this point because the other things that it has been doing has not worked. And so I think it's important for us to remember here, we're talking about league owners. We're not talking about the NFL as a whole. The league office, meaning the commissioner, Troy Vincent, the head of football operations, and others have been pushing for some time to try and level the playing field when it comes to hiring of diverse candidates for head coaching positions and general manager positions. And Michael Locksley, the head coach at Maryland, decided to take this one step further because he, among others, do not buy into this narrative that there's a lack of diverse candidates in the pipeline for head coaching or GM positions. Mm-hmm. And so he came up with founded an organization that's seeking to address that. And on its board of directors, it includes minorities, it includes whites, it includes folks from college, it includes people from the NFL. For instance, Debbie Yao is on it, Ozzie Newsome is on it, Mike Tomlin is on it. And you can go down the list to the folks that are on the board of directors there. And this is long-winded, me getting to addressing your point. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that was so fascinating to me about the recommendations that they made is that they tried to speak reality and not address best case scenarios or what our hopes and aspirations are. And they understand that many times the way that you get NFL owners' attention is by speaking to their pocketbook. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, one of the recommendations that they made is that teams that hire diverse head coaches or GMs, primary football executives, as they call them, that they would be rewarded financially through a greater share of the league's national revenue. The other thing that was really interesting to me is that in that letter, they said that they would like to see the NFL come out and publicly state the root problem of this issue. And that is racism, either actual racism, systemic racism, those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was pretty bold what they put out there. I don't know what kind of traction it's going to get. We'll see. I do think that there is a climate in the NFL now where it is generating enough attention that hopefully some owners will act on it. But it's time. The numbers are so awful. When you talk about only 4 minority head coaches in the NFL, only 3 of them Black, and only 2 Black general managers in the entire NFL, remembering there are 32 teams in a league whose player population is 70% Black. Those numbers just are appalling.
Right. And you look back, Jim, 2003, the Rooney Rule was supposed to be instituted, right? And it was supposed to give the minority coaches an advantage and an opportunity to come into the league. But
Kyle, let me stop you there. And this is a thing where I think people get caught up on the Rooney Rule and sometimes misinterpret what it was for. All it was there for, I mean, the broad goal, the long range goal was that you would increase the number of diverse candidates. Okay. But first and foremost, what it was there for was to slow down the process and to say to NFL owners, take your time here for a minute, interview at least one diverse candidate, and hopefully that will help you broaden your pool of candidates. So it was never to say that the Rooney Rule was specifically going to address the lack of diverse candidates, but really what it was about more than anything was just slow down the process and take the time to interview a diverse field, which was not being done.
Well, let's go to that point. I know Eric Bieniemy was one of the candidates high on a lot of people's list last year, right? And I know the Chiefs were making their march toward the Super Bowl. Do you believe that is part of the process as well, giving a person like, let's say, Eric Bieniemy an opportunity to go through the process and still be considered, even though his team is headed toward the Super Bowl? It seems like some of those coaching slots were quickly being filled, and some were being questionable coaching hires in most people's opinions.
I don't buy that argument at all from this standpoint. Eric Bieniemy was able to interview for jobs during that wild card week, during that bye that the Chiefs had. So any club that was interested in talking to him could have interviewed him then. And the other thing is we've seen in recent history where teams have hired coaches from Super Bowl programs or Super Bowl teams. So that just doesn't wash with me. The thing that was so frustrating to me about the Eric Bieniemy situation a year ago, where there were 7 or 8 head coaching openings, was the fact that we had been told over recent years that what NFL owners were really looking for were young, creative, offensive-minded coaches. Well, the two predecessors to Eric Bieniemy in Kansas City in terms of being the offensive coordinator were Doug Peterson and Matt Nagy, both of whom got head coaching jobs, one with the Eagles, one with the Bears. Right. And yet Eric steps in, and then he has not only a league MVP quarterback one year, but a Super Bowl winning quarterback the next year. And yet he doesn't get one of those 7 or 8 jobs, but a coach, and I'm not casting any aspersions here, but a coach like Joe Judge, who was not on the offensive side of the ball, who was not regarded as a young, creative play caller or a play designer, gets a job in New York with the Giants. And then we later hear John Mara, the owner of the Giants, say, well, he was really looking for a CEO type, and the Joe Judge fit that. And really? my fear is that all of a sudden now the target's being moved, because a decade plus ago, 2 decades ago, Black coaches were told that if you want to be a head coach, the thing you need to do is be on the defensive side of the ball. So many of them went to that side of the ball. Even Mike Tomlin, who started out on offense, went over to defense to get in that pipeline. And then when the Black coaches got over there, all of a sudden we were told, well, no, now owners are looking for offensive guys, creative minds on that side of the ball. And so now you see guys trying to get in that pipeline. And my fear now is that owners are going to move the target again and say, no, you know what? It's neither of those things. Now we want the CEO type, and that's what's unfair in this process.
Yeah, it's like they keep moving the cheese, right? It's really a situation. It's not only frustrating for you, it's frustrating for a lot of the fans looking from the outside in, knowing as what you say is most of the population of the National Football League is minority, right? And most of those players, especially young players today, need to know they can be able to communicate or have somebody to understand their situations, their plight, or where they've come from, right? So do you feel as though, because I read an article by, Martinez Johnson, talking about minority coaches have fared far worse in hiring and even after the hiring, and they're like on a shorter leash, so to speak. Why is that? Why are many minority coaches getting so little time to be able to prove themselves in this league?
Well, I think overall what we've seen are owners have become impatient. Every year we hear of teams going from worst to first. And I think there are many owners that expect that, when they have a club, and there's a lack of patience, finding owners like the Rooney family who have had 3 head coaches in the last, 50 or 60 years.
Right.
I'm trying to do the math off the top of my head. But when you talk about a Chuck Noll, a Bill Cowher, and then a Mike Tomlin, part of that is because the Rooney family is patient and it knows that it takes time to get things up and running, and it's not just doing things sort of whimsically. The other factor that you have to consider here is that oftentimes, if there is a coaching change, it is because a team was bad. And so the head coach who is coming in is taking over a bad team that needs to be turned around. And the problem is that, let's take Arizona, for instance. When Steve Wilkes, who was hired there a couple of years ago, he got 1 year. Why? 1 year. Right. Because they were terrible. He didn't have a franchise quarterback. They drafted Josh Rosen. He wasn't the guy. And yet Steve gets fired after 1 year. And what happens? Arizona is the number 1 pick in the draft. They go out and they get a franchise quarterback in Kyler Murray. And look what he's doing. So the circumstances are often bad. And if an ownership group, an owner or an ownership group are not going to have patience, it's not just black and white. They're firing coaches really quickly. And I say that to say, look at the numbers. Since 2000, on average, we have had 7 head coaching changes per year. Since 2000. Right. That is nearly a quarter of the league being turned over every year. I say, as an owner, that alone should tell you that your blueprint for hiring coaches, something's flawed there. It's a bad business model. And yet they continue to do things the same way, meaning they go out and they hire search firms to tell them who to hire as head coaches, and those sorts of things. And my fear is that we're on a hamster wheel here, where the cycle is just simply going to continue to repeat itself.
Mm-hmm. That's unfortunate, especially with all of the talent, that's abundance of talent. I believe that coaches are going to have, like I look at New Orleans. You have Aaron Glenn. You have C.J. Johnson. Those guys are veterans to the coaching ranks, as well as Aaron Glenn has played in the National Football League. Now he may be up for a defensive coordinator's position, correct? But where does he go from there? Are those opportunities, if he proves himself at the defensive coordinator slot, will he get that opportunity to become a head coach? Who knows right now?
Yeah, Kyle, let me address this real quick. Number one, and I've changed my thought process on this. We have focused so much on the head coaching positions that I really believe the focus should be on the general manager positions. From this standpoint, who is often the person that has the owner's ear right before he makes a hire? Who is the last person to have that owner's ear before he or she makes a decision? Many times it is the general manager. The fact that there are only 2 black general managers in the entire NFL speaks to part of the problem. And that is not to say that a black GM is going to say to the owner, you have to hire this black coach, but he may say, we need to really consider this. We need to broaden our pool of candidates. We need to consider this person because of X, Y, and Z. Right now, we're not even at the table when these decisions are being made. And to me, that's part of the problem. I really believe that if we have more black general managers, we will have more black head coaches, because I do believe they would be more receptive to diverse candidates being hired. Look, I'm not saying that Chris Greer hired Brian Flores down in Miami simply because Brian Flores was black. Mm-hmm. But in my mind, based on the recent history of the NFL, it makes me wonder, knowing that he had worked with Brian Flores in New England at one point, if there was that comfort level that we always hear about, owners being more comfortable with people who look like them, right, who may have some of the same backgrounds as them. Right. And again, I'm not putting that on Chris Greer and saying that is the reason he hired Brian Flores, but you have to wonder also if it was a factor. And as we can see right now, tremendous hire.
Yeah, tremendous hire. He's doing such a great job. Second year, he's turned that program around. Those guys are believing they can win, right? Okay, so Jim, I need to ask this question. Where do we go from here? Is this just a placebo that the NFL is handing to everybody to say, hey, incentivize, we give you a little bit of money, make everybody feel good, or makes the public feel good, or what's really the next step? What should the next step be?
Yeah, Kyle, I don't have that answer. I think the NFL, and particularly the football operations department, has been trying to figure that out, as well as the Fritz Pollard Alliance. And what it comes down to, plain and simple, is owners being willing to hire people of color in leadership positions in their organizations. And as I said recently on our, we had Falcons owner Arthur Blank on Huddle and Flow, the podcast I do with my colleague Steve Weish. And I believe that Arthur Blank is a good man who has created opportunities for people of color in and around Atlanta with the work that he's done there. Mm-hmm. And he talks about the importance of diversity and inclusion and whatnot. And yet I had to ask him, well, Mr. Blank, when I went on your website this morning and I looked at the top 19 executives in your organization, there was only one person of color. So how do I balance you talking about the importance of diversity and inclusion on one hand, and then when I look at the real numbers, it's not there? And to his credit, he said, we have to do better. Now, what does that mean? It's easy to talk that talk, but you have to walk that walk. And I believe, in my opinion, what has to happen is that the NFL has to be intentional here. And look, the league can't tell owners who to hire, but I think if you look at companies around the country, major companies, whether it's news organizations like CBS, whether it's you look at what ABC did in terms of who it hired as its new talent executive, senior VP, things like that. You have to be intentional in what you're doing in addressing this problem. And so maybe you say as a league, the owners agree that within the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to have this number of minority head coaches. In the next 10 years, we want this number. Something to where you put it on paper where folks are being held accountable, as opposed to, yeah, we see it's a problem, we want to address it, but it never gets addressed.
Right. Well, hopefully something does happen, Jim. And I know you've been on top of most of this for a long time. I don't know what the resolution would be as well, but I do know that there's so much talent out there and so many guys who deserve an opportunity. Like you say, at least invite them to the table, see who you could be missing out on, right? And there's a possibility to be able to get somebody into the door. Let's try to do it, right?
Look, you know what I would say to you, Kyle? One of the things that's always so ironic to me is when I hear people say, teams should just hire the best guy. And you know what I say to them? You're absolutely right. We're saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. We want you to hire the best guy.
Right.
But can you say that you're actually hiring the best guy when the numbers reflect that you are discriminating against a certain group?
Right.
That's all we're saying. We want you to hire the best guy. But it's not happening. Here's the other thing, and then I got to run after this. Here's the other thing. Do you know that when it comes to general managers in the history of the NFL, a black general manager who has been fired has never been rehired? Not once has there ever been a minority GM who was fired and then rehired by someone else. We can go down the list with white candidates who have been fired and rehired. So again, what does that say when we're talking about this? Make your own conclusion. I'm just giving you the facts. Now you tell me what they say.
Yeah.
Why is it that a person of color is not good enough to rehire, but we have a number of white candidates who have been fired and gotten multiple opportunities to do it again?
Over and over again.
I just asked that question.
Yeah. Well, we can dive into that a little bit later. But Jim, thank you so much. Tell everybody how they can be able to find you on the internet as well as your podcast.
Yeah, Kyle, they can find me at Jim Trotter _NFL on Twitter. And as far as our podcast, it is called Huddle and Flow, HUDDLE and Flow. You can find it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts or any of the major podcast platforms.
Yeah, you and Steve do some good work, man. And I
We
really do
appreciate
appreciate you coming on. Hopefully, this is not the last time I can be able to have a dialogue with you, okay?
Absolutely. Look forward to it, man.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Be well.
This is Jim Trotter. Take care. Bye.
All right.